Before we get started today, I just want to remind you that we're in the middle of our annual raffle, and tickets are just $50, and it really helps support all the wonderful work that we're doing. If you buy a ticket today, I'll send you a personal thank you letter and a little gift. It's really easy. Just go to www.ndgraffle.com. That's ndgraffle.com. I'll be ever so grateful to you. Now let's get started. Daniel Batson and John Darley sought to understand altruism and the motivation to help others. They posed the famous Good Samaritan experiment in 1973. 40 students at the Princeton Theological Seminary were recruited to participate. Some were instructed to prepare and present a speech on the Good Samaritan from the Bible, and others were asked to speak on a different topic. Once given their topics, students were instructed to walk to another building. Researchers propped an actor posed as a desperate man who was either sick or drunk in the path between the buildings. Now here's the great question. Did the students help the man? You see, likeliness to help depended on a certain condition, and it was totally unrelated to the topic they were instructed to present. So these students, who were ready to discuss the selfless actions of the Good Samaritan, were actually seen stepping over the man in need on their way to present. Now, the students were split into 3 groups. Some were told that they were running late, some were instructed that they had extra time, and others were just on target. This condition was most relevant. Only 10% of the subjects that were in a great hurry actually stopped to help. 63% in the low hurry group and 45% in the medium hurry group. The results seem to imply that philosophizing about high moral grounds doesn't, unfortunately, predict moral behavior. Sorry, I know this is not great news, but it's fascinating. And this reality is actually what makes PInchas, the namesake of this week's Torah portion, so amazing. You see, PInchas was not one of the elders. He was a regular member of society who had learned the Torah along with the rest of the masses. There was no great expectations surrounding his person. There was no role of power or leadership that he yearned to fill. Pinchas was just a regular, ordinary guy. So this regular, ordinary Pinchas sees this man Zimri committing a knowing and blatant act of heresy in plain sight of the rest of the Jewish people. What does he do? He takes matters into his own hands and was ultimately rewarded for what became known as zealotry. Pinchas didn't look to the elders or to the other leaders in society wondering what to do. He didn't fall prey to the bystander effect. In such, he sanctified God's name and maintained the holiness of the nation. It's a complicated story and there's a lot going on. But the story has a tremendous impact on our lives. We live in a time of cruel and murderous actions that are supposedly done for the sake of heaven. The lesson from Pinchas is not to commit crimes or act with violence in any way. Amongst the many reasons that such violent actions are utterly against the Torah is that the Torah requires a person to follow the laws of the country in which they reside. While Pinchas' specific actions relate to the time and place which they occurred, we can take a very important lesson from his courage and haste to act. Pinchas seized the moment even though he was not the one responsible. He didn't look to the elders or to the leaders. He simply saw a situation unfold in front of his eyes and chose to act immediately. He took matters into his own hands. He didn't philosophize. He didn't weigh it. He didn't try to consider the ramifications. The job had to be done, and he did it. Any place or situation in which we find ourselves is meant for us. The situation that I find myself in is meant for me, and the situation that you find yourself in is meant for you. If you're faced with a challenge, it's because you are supposed to deal with it. God only gives us challenges that we can conquer. And we also have the abilities needed for the task, and we have the skills needed for the task. And even if we don't realize it ourselves, God gives us these abilities and these skills. And it's important to note that sometimes the plan of action requires reaching out for help from others. So often you see people walking around the street looking at their phones, mindless, not even realizing what's going on around them, playing some kind of app or game or checking Facebook. Maybe Pinchas is a wake-up call. A wake-up call to stop talking about being a good Samaritan and start being a good Samaritan. Stop jumping over the man in need of help while we're on our way to present on the value of altruism. Let's not bury our heads in the task at hand without looking at the events in the world around us. It's not enough to just mind our own business and stay out of trouble. We have an obligation to society to pay attention and make this world a place in which God would like to be. I'm Rabbi Yisrael Bernath. Shabbat Shalom.